Hey, Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about what is undeposited funds and why you should never use it. And let me be clear right up front. Of course, there are use cases where it works and it's okay, but these are limited, I think, to very, very simple, like I've got a few checks, I need to group them so that they show up in a single deposit. That's what undeposited funds was originally built for. But over the years, as we have accumulated many, many more payment gateways, because we have many more ways of processing payments thanks to the internet, it has gotten infinitely more complex. And here's the thing. While I, again, will agree that for certain very simple use cases, it's probably fine to use undeposited funds, here's why I still won't. And very simply put, it comes down to processes, right? The introduction of a decision, as in should I use it in this case or not, because is it simple enough or not, is an extra decision that slows you down. And I think with what I'm about to show you over the course of the next, whatever this video takes me to do, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, you'll see why it's first of all more important to just land on one process and use that consistently no matter what, and B, why this is a much cleaner way. It's like many processes that make for a better whole system. Sometimes it's better to be inefficient at one point so that we can have clarity and have a more effective operating system later on. And that's what I'm going to illustrate for you here today. I'm going to show you what a mess undeposited funds can become, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to clean it up and make it into a workflow that runs through the balance sheet in a way that makes it so crystal clear exactly what money's coming in, where it came from, where it's going, and how fees were processed and taken out. All of it so much easier than if you try to like smush this all through undeposited funds. In reality, if you're processing payments online with lots of different payment gateways, undeposited funds is going to be a mess. So let's get into it. First and foremost, over here, I've already prepared some data for you. So let's pretend I need to make a deposit because I've been collecting all these payments and now I'm updating the books and I want to see what's going on. I want to record the money that came in, right? So I'm going to go here to create, and under other, I'm going to go to bank deposit. Okay, and by the way, in some cases, this account is now called payments to deposit, right? Which is more consistent with the language here. Select the payments included. The funny thing is this used to say payments to deposit. So for a minute when I learned this, I was like, oh, cool, they're finally being consistent in the language, but now it's different here again. So I'm not really sure what the goal was. I was in a way excited that it's finally going to be consistent. We call it payments to deposit on the balance sheet. We'll call it payments to deposit here. All right. So it is what it is. So here's a list of payments. And if I scroll down, you can already see there's 25 payments in here. There's all different kinds of payment methods, right? And in theory, if I were doing my banking right now, I would have to figure out payment method by payment method, which of these group together, right? Now I can sort by payment method. Okay, and I sort of get it. So here's all the Visa, MasterCard, right? But these are different dates. Now I have to somehow cross-reference this with the processor that processes Visa, MasterCard for me and figure out, well, did this 13th and 16th batch together? The two from the 21st almost assuredly should have batched together, right? And then October 2nd probably would have been on its own. Here's another problem. Notice when I sorted by payment method, you'd like to think I could sort like by date within that. But if I sort by date and then by payment method, actually, that does help. I take back what I was about to say something bad. Actually, that does work. So sort first by date, then by payment method, and it appears that it will, hopefully I didn't just get lucky, it will keep it sorted within the payment method, right? So looking at Stripe, I have the 10th, the 15th, and so that does seem to work here. All right, anyway, even with this, I still have a mess on my hands in terms of trying to figure out how these batched, right? Which things need to get combined into a single deposit. Okay, before I go any further, I'm also going to back up. I want to go to reports, which is over here. Standard is fine. And let's take a look at the balance sheet. And just, I want to make sure, in case you're newer to QuickBooks and maybe I got a little bit ahead too quickly, this is what I'm talking about. This is undeposited funds. And the title of the video does promise to explain what this is. So these are funds that I've received that are sort of in transit. I've received them, but they haven't quite landed in the bank account yet. And really what we're saying is that by now I'm getting ready to go record those deposits, because now that they have been deposited into the bank account, I need to pull them out of undeposited funds and into, in this case, Continental Bank. Okay, now, again, here's the thing. If I had 4 or 5 checks that I received and I took them all to the bank and they added up to the total deposit, this is fine. It worked perfectly. But again, as I already said, I'm a firm believer in being consistent in terms of how I apply my processes. So since we have a situation like what I showed you here, where I've got all these payments, because we've got all these different payment gateways, all these different ways that people pay us, right, across different customers, it doesn't work. It makes a mess. Now, in this case, you can already see I've got 25 payments, but notice what's going on over here. I don't know for sure how many this will show until it goes on to a second page. And trust me, the second this goes on to a second page, if I happen to have like 2 or 3 payments here that I need to grab, and maybe another 2 or 3 payments that show up on the next page, again, it just gets messier and messier the more I dive into trying to use undeposited funds in the way that it was intended. So what is the alternative? The alternative is using clearing accounts. In fact, using a series of them. In fact, every payment gateway gets its own clearing account. Again, this might seem less efficient, and in some cases it is, but it's much, much more effective. It creates a much cleaner audit trail for accounting purposes, and so it's much easier to follow the flow of funds and understand exactly what's where and what happened and what fees we got charged and so on and so forth. So this is what we're going to do. First, I want to show you the structure. Okay, let me go over here to my menu so I can take you to my chart of accounts. Okay, and here's what I set up. So we have our operating accounts for like real bank accounts, right? Continental Bank and iBank. And here's payment gateways. We set these up as a bank account. They really represent cash on hand. So notice that's what I did for the detail type. Not that that really impacts anything, right? But one thing I want to warn you about is that you're going to probably encounter, if you're not the CPA yourself and you're a bookkeeper and you decide to do this, you're probably going to encounter a CPA who's going to look at this and see this on the balance sheet and not like it, because it's not what they're used to seeing, and it's going to make them uncomfortable. And the reality is, I want you to be prepared to explain to them that that's all this is. These are payment gateways that truly represent cash on hand. They're going to want you to put them in other current assets instead of a bank account. I'm going to push back and say, no, we want these as a bank account, because as a bank account, I can record activity in ways that I cannot do in other current assets. Simply put, other current assets only allows me journal entries. That's all I can do with other current assets. Here, I can record deposits. I can record payments out of these accounts to book the fees, and then I can easily move the funds out of the respective payment gateways and into the bank account where the net deposit finally lands. So this is how we want to set it up. And keep in mind, a couple of these things I threw in here just because they're seen often, like Afterpay and Klarna. The reality is, just in case, in case somebody out there is really paying attention, things like Afterpay and Klarna are probably going to get run through something like Stripe. So you may not actually, don't take me too literally. I just want to kind of give you the sense of how this works in general in terms of workflow and your accounting process, right? So now let's fix things, and I want to show you how clean this gets when you fix things the way that I'm going to here. Okay, so again, I want to go over here to my menu, or rather create, and go to bank deposit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a few of these off on recording here to show you how it's done. And let's go back to just sorting this by date. Okay, I'm going to pick a few of these off and show you the fix. Then off recording, I'm going to fix the rest of them, because you don't need to sit here watching me for 10 minutes go through and fix all of these. And then I'm going to show you how I do them, and I'm going to illustrate and prove my point about why it's so much cleaner the way that I'm suggesting. Okay, so let's go to Freya here. And all we need to do for now is change the deposit to from undeposited funds to the clearing account for whatever the payment method is. So you're basically going to line the payment method up with the clearing account. So there's Visa, MasterCard, record and close. It's confirming that since it's linked to other transactions, as in the invoice it's tied to, the answer is yes, it's fine. And then QuickBooks will do its thing and think right? Meanwhile, let's just go back to the bank deposit. All right, let's pick off another one. ISIS was Afterpay, right? Afterpay, record and close, and yes. All right, so you get the idea. I'll do one more, and then I'll just finish them off recording so you don't have to sit here watching me. I'm sure some of you just love to watch me, but anyway. I don't know what's going on here and where QuickBooks is going to land. I would hope that it will take me back into the payments to deposit area of a deposit screen, but I'm not going to assume that, and so I'm just going to jump ahead and kind of force it. So this part's a little annoying. Again, another reason why I don't love using this feature of QuickBooks, because even accessing these payments like this is clunky, right? All right, so let's do Athena. She paid with Amex. So I can click here and type Amex. And of course, we just want to make sure we're picking, you know, the right account here. It's a Subway. It's a Subway. That's good. A sub account of payment gateways. Record and close. Okay, and now I'm going to just finish this off recording and just get them all out of undeposited funds and into their respective payment gateways. Real quick. If I go to reports now and I go to the balance sheet, just so you can see what's going on. Right, so my undeposited funds is going down, okay? And notice what's happening here. My payment gateways are showing up on my balance sheet, because that's what we're doing, is we're basically taking money out of undeposited funds and splitting it up according to the payment gateway, which is consistent with the actual payment method, because then each payment gateway is going to have its own kind of fee processing to clear through so that we land on the net amount that lands in the bank. So you're going to see by the end of this video, if you stick it out, stick with me till the end, you're going to see how much cleaner this is. I promise you, you're all going to be in the comments section saying, Seth, oh my God, thank you so much. This is so much better than undeposited funds. Okay, so I finished reallocating all the payments. So you can see the total in payment gateways is 26K. I probably should have noted it before just to sort of prove things, but obviously that must have been the same amount that was in undeposited funds. And again, you may be looking at your own QBO company, and this might be called payments to deposit now in yours. I learned actually today, the day I'm recording this, that they started changing that, but these things tend to roll out little by little regionally, so not everybody gets all the updates at once. So here it is in the payment gateways, and again, if we go to reports and run the balance sheet, it gives us a much clearer picture than we get just looking at the chart of accounts. But it's the same thing, it's the same information. So here's my payment gateways, 24K. I feel like I said 26K. Did I just see it wrong? See, and now, by the way, this is an important thing. You should always check these things to see. No, in fact, this does say 26K, and I'll tell you why. This is the important thing. So always pay attention to these things and ask yourself, what would I expect to see? Compare that with what do I see, and I'll tell you exactly what's going on. This balance sheet is through November 6th. Okay, and I'm going to guess that I didn't pay attention to my sample data, and I probably have some post-dated stuff. So let's confirm that. Here's 24K. I'm going to change this outer range to November 30th. And sure enough, there's my 26K. So nothing to do with the subject matter of today's video, but always a good thing to point out how important it is to pay attention, especially when you're fixing something, because a lot of you are going to watch this video and hopefully go say, you know what, I love his idea, I'm going to go clean up my books, right? So if you're going to do something like that, if you're going to get into undeposited funds or payments to deposit and move things around, just pay attention, make sure it makes sense, make sure that when you're done, whatever the total was that was originally in undeposited funds is now the total in your payment gateways, right? Now, what's going to happen next is that, you know, as these payments get processed through these payment gateways, they're going to get swept into your bank account at the net amounts after fees are taken out. So let's use one simple example. Let's take Stripe, okay? And by the way, before we even get to process the fees in Stripe, you know, what's going to happen is you're going to download your banking into your, you know, through your bank feed into your bank account, and you're going to see Stripe deposits, and those are going to be at the net amounts. And when you book those, what you're going to do is you're going to book those deposits into your Continental Bank account or whatever your operating account is. And when you select the account for the deposit to sort of offset to, you're going to choose Stripe. Okay, and so little by little, that's going to eat away at this balance, but the difference that's going to be left behind is going to be the Stripe fees that you'll pay. All right, so let's dig in here. I'm going to click into Stripe so we can analyze the activity and really kind of look at it timing wise, right? So let's just try and think in terms of what might happen in the real world if this wasn't just like sample data, right? So I'm going to duplicate my tab so I can keep my place. And I'm going to say that the sum of these two, right, or 15, 28, 54, would have been deposited into Stripe. Let's call it 3 days later on the 13th, right? So again, I'm making up numbers, but this is essentially how Stripe works. There's about a 2 to 3 day delay. And there's going to be fees taken out. So here's what we're going to do. So while QuickBooks Online is figuring itself out, let's figure the fee. So we want to record a fee out of Stripe, let's say based on 3% of this total, based on this batch. If you ever download a Stripe report, you'll see it deducts the fees from each amount that gets processed, right? And then depending on how much volume you have, you can book the whole fee amount at the end of the month, which I've done sometimes, or you can just book it in as you record these payments that came in from Stripe. Oftentimes, I'll do it as a sales receipt and deduct the fee in the same transaction, right? So let's say we would just want to get the fees recorded on the 10th based on 3% of this total. So we're going to go to create, and I'm going to create an expense. Now this is why it's very useful to set these up as bank accounts and not other current assets, because I can't record an expense in an other current asset. So if you get that CPA or enrolled agent who's like, why are you setting these up as bank accounts? Now you know how to explain it to them, okay? And so who did I pay? It would be, Stripe as a vendor, because we're paying them the fees that they charged us for processing. Okay, and I'll just save that for now. Don't need to put any details, but this is not coming out of the operating account. It's coming out of the Stripe account. Okay, so I want 3% of 15, 28, 54, and watch this cool trick. I can do the math right here. 15, 28, 54 times 0.03. Hit the tab key. Done. Category. Processing fees. I'll just call it merchant processing fees for now. I'll call it Stripe fees for 10, 11, whatever that date was. Okay, and of course this should be dated accordingly. Right, and again, that's why I like having the two tabs with the different views so I can confirm 10/10 is the date that I want to record that on. Back over to here. Not a huge difference, but again, this is accounting, so details definitely matter, right? So I'm going to hit save and close. Got my fees processed. Okay, let's refresh the view. And so now I can see, and this is the net amount that's going to land in my account on the 13th or so, 1482.68, right? So what would have happened is we would have done it through the bank feed somehow, but since I don't have live bank feeds to work with here, first let's refresh this, because now Stripe should show this reduced for the fee. And again, let's extend the date out so we're seeing everything for sure. Okay, 73.42.90, right? The total should be a little less, and always check your work. So I'm going to click in here and make sure that I got my fees in there. So I got my fees in there. All right, now let's record the deposit. So I'm going to go banking, bank deposit. And again, remember this would have normally happened through the bank feeds, but this is essentially what you'll do. So we have a deposit going into Continental Bank. The account it comes out of is Stripe. Okay, and the amount is going to be that net amount of 1482.68, and we're going to say it happened on 10/13. So let's get the date right. Okay, and again, 1482.68. So this is basically saying we're going to get a deposit into Continental Bank. It's going to come out of the Stripe payment gateway. Okay, you can put stripe in the receive from, not really necessary. None of this is critical. This is really all you need. And if I hit save and close, okay, and then this time the report refreshed by itself. There I am. So now my stripe account zeroes out. Now, zooming out, bigger picture. This I went through slowly and deliberately so you could see how every piece of it kind of comes together. In reality, in the big picture, once you understand this process and how clean this is, what you understand is that throughout the month or week or however often you're going to update these books, every deposit that comes into Continental Bank, whatever the amount is, you're just going to book it against the stripe account. And that's coming in at the net. Then at whatever interval you decide is going to be your process in terms of how you interact with these books, is where at certain intervals, maybe it's just monthly, you're going to reconcile the stripe activity. And like I said, you can just book the whole month's fees at once. You can pull a stripe report, download that into a CSV and just total the fees column for the exact date range of 1 month and book that as the fees. And then you can reconcile this to zero. The worst that might happen is something that happened near the end of the month because of Stripe's lag in terms of when they fund you. Yeah, you might have this as like kind of a deposit in transit. So if you go to reconcile this at the end of the month, you might end up just leaving this unchecked because it'll clear with the next month's activity. So this is the way this is going to work for every single other payment gateway, so that by the time I was done, if I stopped all the activity, right, and just reconciled all this and booked the fees, all of these would zero out perfectly, which is to say, and I need to refresh this, I guess, because my Continental Bank should be showing, there it is, that deposit. So that's one other thing. If you're not used to the new reports layout in QuickBooks Online, with reports you now have to click the refresh option in most cases in order for it to update based on whatever changes you've made. It's got pluses and minuses, right? In a way it's good because sometimes you actually want to go back to what it was before the change, but I think a lot of us, like me, who've used QuickBooks Online for years, just really got used to the idea that I expected it to refresh. So sometimes it gets a little annoying because I look and I'm like, what's wrong? Why didn't that update? And next thing I know, instead of remembering to refresh, I'm going, did I not record that correctly? Did I not pick the right bank account? And then it's like, oh no, just got to hit refresh, right? So just get in the habit of hitting that refresh button anytime you go out of a screen to do something and then come back to something like a report like this. Okay, this, my friends, is why, and hopefully it's compelling evidence in terms of how much cleaner this is. Yes, it's less efficient, but yes, it's way more effective in terms of giving you the audit trail you need so you can clearly see exactly what's going on account by account. Because like I said, everything now is going to download into the bank account, and I'm going to pull it based on wherever it came from against its corresponding payment gateway. And then weekly or monthly, whatever you choose, I can update the activity, record the fees. By recording things the way I'm talking about, by the time you get into the payment gateway, all those transfers out of the payment gateways will be there already, right? Because you booked them on the bank side. So all you'll need to do is account for the fees and reconcile it to zero, and it works just perfectly. And it doesn't matter if I have 100 transactions in a month. It's so much easier to manage than to use that payments to deposit window that we started off with at the beginning of this video. As always, I'd love your feedback. If you disagree with me, I welcome the disagreement. Let's have the conversation. Let's talk about it. And in fact, let's do that in Talk Nerdy to Me, because that's my community where I can invite you to, first of all, not just watch the video, but look at the textbook style write-up with screenshots so you can follow it step by step. That way, everybody's a different kind of learner. And then you can dive in and ask the questions there. And it's a very vibrant community, so it's the perfect place to have this conversation. Of course, you're also welcome to post your comments if you're watching this on YouTube right below in the comments section. But I would love to see more of you come over into my Talk Nerdy to Me community. It's a great place for us to hang out and learn and go back and forth on these kind of things like best practices and the best possible processes for getting the books done. And I keep stressing this because it's so important to me. Not necessarily always in the most efficient way possible, but always in the most effective way possible.